this episode, we begin with one of the most practical ideas in cybersecurity, because security work is not really about eliminating every possible problem. It is about understanding what could go wrong, deciding what matters most, and responding in a disciplined way that supports the mission of the organization. That broader discipline is called risk management, and it matters because every system, process, team, and business decision carries some level of uncertainty. New learners sometimes imagine security as a constant battle to block every bad outcome, but real organizations do not have unlimited time, unlimited staff, or unlimited money. They need a way to make choices under constraints, and that is exactly why a risk management lifecycle exists. It gives structure to decisions so the organization can identify important risks, evaluate them in context, choose a reasonable response, and keep paying attention as conditions change over time. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good place to start is with the meaning of risk itself, because many beginners use the word in a vague way that makes the rest of the topic feel foggy. Risk is not just danger in the abstract, and it is not the same as fear. In a security context, risk is the possibility that a threat could take advantage of a weakness and cause harm to something the organization values. That harm might affect information, systems, operations, finances, reputation, legal obligations, or even safety, depending on the environment. This means risk is not only about what bad thing exists in the world. It is also about how exposed the organization is, how likely a harmful event is to occur, and how severe the outcome would be if it did happen. Once you understand risk this way, the subject becomes more concrete, because you are no longer thinking only in terms of scary headlines. You are thinking in terms of meaningful business harm and how organizations prepare for it. That leads naturally to the idea of a life cycle, which is more than just a sequence of boxes to memorize. A life cycle means risk management is ongoing, repeated, and responsive rather than something completed once and forgotten. Organizations do not assess risk a single time and then live happily ever after. New systems are introduced, employees change roles, vendors come and go, attackers adapt, regulations shift, and business priorities move. Because of that, risk management has to keep cycling through awareness, review, action, and reevaluation. A beginner should picture it less like a checklist that ends and more like the care of a garden. You do not remove weeds once and declare the garden permanently protected. You keep watching, adjusting, pruning, and improving because the environment keeps changing. That same logic applies to security risk. The point is not to freeze the organization in perfect safety. The point is to guide it through changing conditions with awareness and discipline. Within that life cycle, organizations usually begin by identifying what matters and what could threaten it. This is sometimes harder than it sounds because beginners often jump straight to dramatic attack scenarios without first asking what the organization is actually trying to protect. Risk management starts with assets, processes, services, and obligations that are important enough to care about. That could include customer data, payroll systems, communication platforms, manufacturing equipment, cloud services, business records, or the ability to continue operations during disruption. Once those priorities are clearer, the organization can begin identifying relevant threats and weaknesses that could affect them. A threat is something with the potential to cause harm, while a weakness is a condition that makes that harm easier. If a company depends heavily on one system for daily work, then prolonged downtime becomes a major concern. If sensitive records are widely accessible, then exposure becomes a major concern. The first step of risk management is therefore not panic. It is disciplined awareness of what matters and where it could fail. After risks are identified, the next major process is assessment, which is where the organization tries to understand how serious each risk really is. Assessment is about judgment, not fortune-telling. You are not predicting the future with complete certainty. You are using available information to estimate how likely a harmful event may be and how damaging the result would be if it occurred. Beginners often assume this stage is mostly mathematical, but while numbers can help, the bigger skill is structured reasoning. The organization asks practical questions about exposure, existing safeguards, business dependence, likely impact, and the environment in which the system operates. Some risks may be unlikely but catastrophic. Others may be more common but easier to manage. A good assessment makes those differences visible so people can stop treating every risk as equally urgent. That matters because equal treatment of all risks sounds fair on the surface, but in practice it usually leads to wasted effort, distracted teams, and weaker protection where it actually counts. A related point that beginners need to grasp is the difference between absolute safety and informed prioritization. Security professionals are sometimes imagined as people who simply want maximum protection everywhere. But real organizations cannot operate that way without damaging their own ability to function. Risk management helps leaders and practitioners decide where limited effort should go first and what level of exposure is acceptable in context. This is where the idea of risk appetite becomes useful even for a new learner. Risk appetite reflects how much risk an organization is willing to tolerate in pursuit of its goals. A hospital, a school, a bank, a defense contractor, and a small retail business may all face cyber risk, but their tolerance for downtime, data exposure, or system failure may differ significantly because their missions and obligations differ. This teaches an important lesson. Risk management is not just about technical danger. It is about business context, organizational priorities, and the reality that every safeguard choice exists inside a larger mission. Once a risk has been assessed, the organization must choose how to respond, and this is where the process becomes especially practical. A common beginner mistake is assuming the only proper response is to fix everything immediately. In reality, organizations usually have several broad response options depending on the nature of the risk and the business situation. They may reduce the risk by adding safeguards, changing processes, limiting access, improving training, or increasing resilience. They may avoid the risk by stopping a risky activity altogether or redesigning how something is done. They may transfer some of the burden through contracts, insurance, or outsourced responsibilities, although that never removes all responsibility entirely. Or they may accept the risk if the cost or disruption of additional control is not justified by the remaining exposure. None of these options should be chosen casually, but each one can be appropriate in the right context. Risk management is therefore not a single answer machine. It is a structured way to compare response choices against business reality. This is also the point where people begin to see why risk management is so closely tied to decision-making rather than to technology alone. Consider a simple example involving an older business system that supports an important process but is expensive to replace quickly. The organization may know the system carries security weaknesses, yet shutting it down tomorrow might stop core operations and create even greater harm. That does not mean the weakness should be ignored. It means the response may involve temporary safeguards, tighter monitoring, restricted access, or staged replacement rather than an immediate removal. Beginners sometimes see that kind of choice and think the organization is being careless. A better interpretation is that risk management is balancing multiple forms of harm at once. Security decisions are often made in environments where every option carries cost, friction, and consequences. The goal is not to pretend those trade-offs do not exist. The goal is to handle them honestly and systematically so leaders are making informed choices instead of drifting into risk by accident. Another important concept is residual risk, which is the risk that remains after safeguards and controls have been applied. This is one of the clearest reminders that security does not create perfection. Even strong protections leave some exposure behind because attackers adapt, systems remain complex, and human behavior is never fully predictable. Beginners can become discouraged when they realize this, as if the presence of residual risk means the whole effort has failed. It means the opposite. Mature security work recognizes that some risk will remain and focuses on understanding whether that remaining exposure is acceptable, visible, and managed responsibly. Residual risk matters because it keeps organizations honest. They cannot claim that a control solved everything just because it improved the situation. They still need to ask what could happen next, whether the remaining exposure fits within tolerance, and whether any additional action is justified. That mindset makes risk management more realistic and more sustainable than a false promise of complete safety. Monitoring is what keeps the life cycle alive after an initial decision has been made. A response that seemed reasonable 6 months ago may become weak if the environment changes, new threats appear, usage increases, or a business dependency becomes more important. Monitoring, therefore, means watching for changes that affect the level or nature of risk. This can include changes in systems, people, vendors, processes, regulations, attack patterns, or performance of existing controls. Beginners should notice that monitoring is not merely passive observation. It supports new decisions. If a safeguard is not working as expected, or if a previously minor system becomes central to operations, the organization may need to reassess and adjust. Monitoring also reinforces accountability because it prevents risk decisions from fading into the background without review. Risk management fails when choices are made once and then treated as permanent, even though the real world keeps moving. Continuous attention is what turns a paper process into an actual management discipline. Communication is another essential process, and it is often underestimated because it sounds softer than technical defense. In truth, risk management depends on people understanding what the risks are, who owns them, what decisions were made, and what responsibilities follow from those decisions. Technical teams, business leaders, compliance staff, system owners, and everyday users all need different parts of the picture. A system owner may need to know what weaknesses still exist and what controls are expected. Senior leadership may need to understand which risks affect mission goals, cost, or legal exposure. Staff may need clearer expectations about behavior that reduces operational risk. If risk information stays trapped in one corner of the organization, then decisions become fragmented and accountability becomes weak. For beginners, this shows that risk management is partly about translation. Good practitioners do not only identify risk, they explain it in a way that helps the right people act on it, fund it, accept it, or monitor it responsibly. Documentation also matters because risk management is not just a feeling that something seems dangerous. It is a structured record of what was identified, how it was assessed, what decision was made, and what follow-up is required. This does not mean every risk process must become heavy and bureaucratic, but it does mean important decisions should be traceable. Documentation helps organizations remember why a choice was made, what assumptions supported it, and who approved it. That becomes valuable when conditions change, audits occur, incidents happen, or questions arise later about whether the organization acted reasonably. Beginners sometimes roll their eyes at documentation because it seems less exciting than defense tools or incident stories. But without clear records, risk management can become inconsistent and fragile. People leave roles, memories fade, and assumptions get lost. Documentation provides continuity and shared understanding, which are both essential when security decisions affect operations, legal duties, and leadership confidence. It is also important to separate risk management from simple fear-based thinking. A fear-based approach reacts strongly to whatever sounds worst in the moment, often without careful comparison, context, or discipline. Risk management is calmer than that. It recognizes that some threats are serious, some are less urgent, some controls are worth the effort, and some responses create new problems if applied carelessly. This measured posture is one reason the topic matters so much for a foundational certification. It teaches learners to think beyond raw anxiety and toward organized judgment. When a new system is proposed, a vendor is introduced, or a change is requested, the right reaction is not automatic trust, and it is not automatic rejection. The better reaction is to ask what could go wrong, what matters most, what safeguards exist, what exposure remains, and what response best fits the mission. That style of thinking is valuable far beyond formal risk programs because it strengthens nearly every other security decision you will make. As you grow more comfortable with the subject, you begin to see that risk management connects many other security topics into one larger logic. Governance sets expectations and ownership. Controls reduce exposure. Continuity planning addresses disruption. Access management limits misuse. Awareness training reduces human error. Monitoring reveals change. Incident response deals with harm when it occurs. All of those activities become easier to understand when you realize they are not random security chores. They are parts of how organizations identify, assess, respond to, and monitor risk over time. That connection is especially helpful for beginners because it turns cybersecurity from a pile of separate topics into a system of related decisions. Instead of memorizing each area in isolation, you begin seeing how each one contributes to the larger goal of managing uncertainty in a disciplined and mission-aware way. That is one reason this episode matters so much. It gives you a lens that helps many future topics make more sense. As we close, remember that the risk management lifecycle is not a side topic reserved for executives, auditors, or specialists with spreadsheets. It is one of the central ways organizations make security decisions that are realistic, documented, and tied to business needs. The lifecycle begins by identifying what matters and what could harm it. It continues through assessment, response selection, communication, documentation, and ongoing monitoring because conditions never stay frozen for long. Along the way, it teaches a foundational lesson that every new learner should carry forward. Good security is not built by chasing every fear equally or pretending all risk can disappear. It is built by understanding exposure, prioritizing wisely, taking proportionate action, and revisiting decisions as the environment changes. Once you internalize that mindset, many other cybersecurity topics stop feeling disconnected because you can see them for what they really are: practical ways of helping organizations navigate uncertainty with discipline, accountability, and purpose.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.